What's up, everybody? It's June 11th, and Donald Trump just declared peace and the end to the Iran war. But Iran says that that's not true. So automatically, we kind of have the same situation as always. We're going back and forth on this ceasefire, peace deals, and then we go back and strike one another. Iran is getting struck. The United States is getting struck, at least on our bases over in the Middle East. And meanwhile, again, we also have Israel in the middle. But apparently Netanyahu was left out of this entire deal. And that's what I find interesting. What is the truth? Are we going to continue this war or not? And so ultimately, we're going to look into that. We're going to see all the different angles from the media. And we're going to review a lot of the different strikes that happened yesterday. There was a lot of different strikes that happened just this past week that suggest that maybe this war is actually just picking up. So let's get into it. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And without further ado, let's get into the news. So again, very big information today. So when we look at everything going on, we see that this war is not ending anytime soon. Trump says he has canceled strikes on Iran, signals move toward deal. The president's comments mark a shift after 2 nights of attacks between the two countries, coming hours after he said the U.S. would hit Iran very hard tonight. So again, this is kind of what's going on today.
Dropped $250 million worth of bombs on them last night. They're really in submission. They just don't know it yet.
President Trump had said earlier that he wanted to seize Karg Island, which serves as a terminal for nearly all of Iran's oil exports. The U.S. and Iran traded attacks for a second straight day earlier, or on Wednesday, I should say. The strikes coming after the downing of an Army helicopter by an Iranian drone. Joining us now, NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley in Qatar and NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. Monica, frankly, it's a little head-spinning. What more do we know about this reversal by President Trump this afternoon?
Yeah, Kate, and look, we've been here before. There is this familiar pattern that we have seen of the president making a threat. Sometimes he does act on it, sometimes he doesn't, then saying that there is perhaps a diplomatic breakthrough that is imminent. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't, and then we kind of start all over again. So it's a little bit unclear which this is right now, I have to be honest with you, but it is the president's way of trying to indicate that there has been some progress. Again, we have heard that many, many times over the course of the last 13 weeks, and certainly over the course of the last few months when there has been a sort of fragile and shaky ceasefire in place. But the fact that the president even just earlier today said he was planning to hit Iran tonight very hard, threatening to potentially use U.S. forces, which is what it would require, we think, to take Karg Island, to now back away from that. We haven't gotten the exact indication from the White House what actually changed. But if you look at his True Social post, when he does mention some of these Gulf allies and other countries in the region that have signed off on this, he says the real question is what exactly has been signed off on here by senior Iranian leadership that he says, again, at the highest level of that, have agreed to this in addition to what the president has. But we don't know what that agreement is, whether it is short term, whether it really just kicks off an intensive period of actual negotiations, or where we really are in this reality of this moment. Kate.
Well, and Matt, given everything Monica just said, I'm sure it's a little unclear where you are, too, but the president did name 10 countries in the region in his post and said discussions and final points for a deal have been agreed to by those countries. Are we hearing anything about those countries?
But the only country that you didn't hear from is Israel. And I think that's very interesting because it's actually putting pressure, political pressure, on Netanyahu to end this entire war, to stop bombing Lebanon. Again, a lot of things happening there. But ultimately, Trump is using his political brain to end this war as much as he can. At least that's the optics of it. And maybe that's the entire goal. Maybe it's all a psyop. Maybe there's actually more to come in the future. But we're going to pay attention. We don't really know yet.
Well, I wish I could tell you that we are, but I think everybody in these countries, and Qatar is one of them, a major interlocutor when it comes to all of these negotiations, trying to find a negotiated solution to this crisis. I think everybody here is feeling exactly like Monica just mentioned, scratching their heads, reading that Truth Social post and wondering what is going on. I can tell you that there have been feverish negotiations by the Qataris and by all of these countries in the Gulf. The Qataris had sent a delegation to Iran yesterday, to Tehran, and I understand from my conversations with sources here in Qatar that they returned early this morning after marathon all-night meetings trying to find a solution. We also know that some of these Gulf countries had huddled in Bahrain over just the past couple of days, also trying to find a negotiated solution. Now, what do these countries all have to do with the fate of the Iran conflict? Well, they have all been on the beating end of Iran's attacks. So whenever the U.S. attacks, it's countries like this one, Qatar or Kuwait or Bahrain, who get it the worst.
And again, well, that's all mainly because one of the reasons that these other countries are getting attacked by Iran is because they are Arabic states, and the Iranians see that as betrayal. Like, how could you betray us? How could you really pretend like you are our allies? So again, this is the big statement that I was actually going to start with, and so this is Trump basically talking about this peace deal and this the fact that the Iran war is officially over.
Made a great settlement of the war with Iran, and we're going to be subject to finalization of documents, which should get done over the.
Hold on, YouTube copyrighted that one. That was a different version of that. This should be correct.
We just made a great settlement of the war with Iran, and we're going to be subject to finalization of documents, which should get done over the next few days. Probably have a signing maybe in Europe, and it's a great thing. Stock market's up 1,000 points. That means they like the deal. See, that means they like. If the market goes down, that means they don't like the deal. But it's been up, oil's dropped. Oil will start coming down to, I think, even lower than it was before. I said I was in Iowa. It was $1.85 a gallon.
How confident are you that there will be a signing this weekend? Because you have come close to sealing a deal, but at the last minute it has fallen apart. And
It'll be soon. Maybe this weekend.
And has the Supreme Leader
What do you
approved
think?
this deal, sir?
I understand the answer is yes.
And when this deal is signed, is the United States going to immediately lift the blockade?
Yes, that's part of the deal.
And just
And you'll
one.
have oil prices dropping like a rock.
And sir, have you actually secured an agreement on the discussions about the nuclear material and the nuclear negotiations?
Yes,
Has Iran-
conceptually on that, and nobody's getting close to it because it's buried under a mountain, basically. There's B-2 bombers in there.
I wonder if that's going to happen. Honestly.
But has Iran committed to not pursuing a nuclear weapon, or will there be more negotiations on that down the
They will
line?
not have a nuclear weapon. They've agreed to that. There will be no, which is the whole reason, which is a big part of the reason.
Is that
maybe
going
the
to be in your
biggest.
agreement, sir?
They will not only not have, they will not purchase, develop in any way, any shape, in any way, shape, or form a nuclear weapon. They will not have a nuclear weapon.
We will see about that. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it's going to be really interesting to see where this entire thing goes. But honestly, just by the looks of it, who really knows where it can go? Because, again, Donald Trump has flip-flopped over and over and over again on this entire thing. Trump now says a peace deal will be announced soon, cancels further strikes. Again, this article is from HOW. President Trump said Thursday he's canceling strikes in Iran for this evening and that a peace deal is imminent. It's the latest salvo in a series of whiplash proclamations threatening more strikes and promising peace, based on the fact that discussions with the Islamic Republic and Iran have been brought to the highest level of Iranian leadership and approved. I have, as the President of the United States of America, canceled the scheduled strikes and bombings against Iran this evening, he wrote on Truth Social. The naval blockade will remain in full force and effect until this transaction is finalized. Time and place of the signing to be announced shortly, he added. He said later in the Oval Office, we should get done over the next few days. We're going to have a signing maybe in Europe, it's a great thing. Trump was asked if if they secured an agreement on the nuclear issues, and he said yes conceptually. This comes as Trump in recent days again began amping up his war rhetoric. Early Thursday morning, the president had said that the U.S. will attack Iran very hard tonight, while almost simultaneously telling Fox News two sides are still negotiating. Trump posted that the U.S. would also seize vital Iranian oil infrastructure, including Karg Island, at some point in the not-too-distant future. Really interesting. It's always flip-flop with Donald Trump. The island, a key oil infrastructure site for Iran, has long been on the U.S. military's radar as a strategic target, but carries a high potential for U.S. casualties. My preference has always been take Karg Island, Trump said on Fox News, adding later. But I don't know that America has the stomach. And now Trump says the deal is to close, that he says the time and place of the signing will be announced shortly. The somewhat conflicting statements represent the box Trump finds himself is trying to will and bomb Iran into submission as inflation hits the highest number in years and his popularity remains at a low point. It's clear that Trump wants the war to be over. Jennifer Stromer Galley, a professor of information studies at Syracuse University, says that there are also so many other things out of his control. I think from a rhetorical perspective, Trump is still trying to manufacture reality that he wants to be true. But it comes up against the actual state of affairs that he doesn't have much control over it at the end of the day, she said. She said it's also about assuring Americans that it's going to work out as if he promised, if he just has a little bit more time to end the war. The challenge is gas prices keep going up. Electricity is getting more expensive. And after weeks and weeks of hearing the same thing, polls show Americans are losing confidence in the message. After more than 3 months of war, Iran has effectively shut down the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway through which about 20% of the world's energy supplies travel. A volatile ceasefire has been in place since April, but the two sides have been increasingly striking each other's targets as Trump has grown frustrated about a lack of a deal. So again, when we look at these other stories here, this is where things kind of conflict. The new supreme leader of Iran, Mojtaba Khamenei, won't agree to the new proposed peace deal with the United States, according to reports from sources close to the matter. If the conservative media outlets reporting this correct, it would appear that the Iranian negotiating team has not been truthful with the mediators. The latest reports from Iran say that the decision to say that the deal is signed was made by a Speaker of the Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, but was made without Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei's blessing. So who really knows? It doesn't look like the Iranians are really on board to end this war, especially because we've kind of killed our credibility with them via negotiations. We say that we're going to have a peace deal, and then we bomb them. And again, you have Hegseth saying if they want to negotiate with bombs, then we'll negotiate with bombs, right? It's kind of crazy. Meanwhile, Netanyahu reportedly was not given a heads up about Trump's announcement, and he was caught off guard. This is from the Times of Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was not given a heads up before U.S. President Donald Trump called off further strikes against Iran and said a deal could soon be signed, with the announcement catching him off guard, the Axios news site reports, citing a source with knowledge of the matter. So again, pretty crazy. At the end of the day, Netanyahu was not invited to this deal. And so that tells you a lot. And then at the same time, it means a lot that Donald Trump had all of these other Gulf states, these Gulf countries, basically on board for this, and basically included them in this Truth Social post that was going viral. And essentially, this puts political pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel to stop bombing Lebanon, essentially. This is what happened just the other day. Israel kills 16 in Lebanon, UN to probe international law violations, UN investigators to arrive in Lebanon next week to assess potential violations of international law by all parties. So I tried to play this yesterday, and we just started glitching like crazy. So we'll see if it happens again. But ultimately, I did want to play this video, and I did want to cover this story. So take a look at this. This is pretty recent. And again, this had just happened on June 10th, just yesterday. And nobody talked about this. This was
Israeli forces are continuing to strike targets across southern Lebanon, including in Tyre, the second largest city in the country's south. The Israeli military says it's targeting Hezbollah sites, but locals and residential and commercial areas are being hit. 10 people have been killed so far on Wednesday, including 2 people in a drone strike on a car in Sidon. Thousands of people are fleeing the city after the Israeli army issued forced displacement orders. Obeida Hito is joining us live now from the city of Tyre in southern Lebanon. Obeida, those evacuation orders applied to the entire city. Those who have managed to leave, will have already done so, but are those evacuations and displacements continuing?
That's right. The evacuations continue because the firing, the Israeli airstrikes, continue to get closer to the city of Tyre. We've already seen several deadly strikes today, very close to the city. That was following strikes yesterday that were also quite deadly in similar locations. Israel issued a forced evacuation order covering the entire city, including the Christian quarter, specifically telling people in the surrounding Palestinian refugee camps to leave. We've seen Israel then follow that up with several strikes on those refugee camps this morning. Deir Qanun al-Nahar as well as Ter Dibba have also been targeted in the vicinity of the city here in Tyre. Over the last several hours, we've seen an ongoing battle intensify between Hezbollah and Israeli troops on the southwest front here. Israel focusing its fire on the town of Majd al-Zoun as well as Mansouri, Qulayla and Hannai. These are all towns that are right at the edge of the front line at Bayyada, where Israeli troops are currently occupying Lebanese territory. They've made 2 attempts over the last 48 hours to advance into But al-Sayyad and take more territory here in the south. Hezbollah says they've targeted them and stopped that advance from happening. But what that's turning out to be is bad news for anybody who's here in the city of Tyre as Israel intensifies its attacks, targeting places that are generally very heavily populated, densely populated, and resulting in a huge spike in the death toll. According to the new figures released by the Ministry of Health just minutes ago, 3,696 people killed in Lebanon, 30 of them within the past 24 hours here in the south.
That's crazy.
Obadi, you mentioned the death toll
Nobody
so far,
talked
so
about
obviously
this yesterday. This was not discussed in the media. That's the issue. Like, nobody talked about this. And again, when I tried to talk about it, for some reason we were lagging like crazy yesterday's stream. She's still lagging a bit today. But ultimately, nobody talked about this. And maybe this was why Netanyahu was left out of the Iran peace deal that Trump just made today. If that deal is real, of course.
not everybody who can or wants to leave is able to do so. Talk us through the humanitarian situation then and the rescue efforts that are able to happen when these strikes occur.
Well, there's already over 1 million people displaced from their homes. Israel has demonstrated its willingness to continuously target paramedics, ambulance drivers, ambulances, medical facilities. So whenever there's a strike, even if there are Lebanese civil defense and other emergency workers rushing to the scene, they are definitely in the line of fire. The situation for people who are fleeing the south and reaching places in Sidon or north of the Zahrani River are also finding that the situation remains quite dangerous. Just a couple hours ago, Israel carried out a drone strike on a vehicle in the city of Sidon, where tens of thousands of internally displaced people have gone and stayed for many of these last several weeks as the violence has increased, thinking it was going to be safe. But what we're seeing is that Israel is increasingly targeting moving vehicles in very densely populated areas.
Christian areas, too. Christian areas overall.
The forced evacuation orders that were issued today are all in the Sidon province, where tens of thousands of people have gone thinking it would be safe. And anybody who's on the roads trying to get out of the south, they have to take this one road that leads from Tyre to Sidon and then north of the Zahrani River. But that trip by itself is extremely dangerous.
All right, Obaida Hito joining us live from Tyre in southern Lebanon. Thank you.
And Tyre, Lebanon is one of the most ancient cities ever. It's like one of the oldest cities that's ever existed. So pretty crazy story there. Nobody talked about it in the media. And today there was a strike as well. We also had J.D. Vance responding to the incident, not that specific incident, but talking about the Israelis and kind of their involvement with this entire peace negotiation.
Your up-close assessment of how Prime Minister Netanyahu has handled his relationship with President Trump and the United States.
Well, I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, look, he governs a country that has obviously been a very close partner of the United States. But even when we've been close partners, sometimes we have interests that are perfectly aligned.
So close that we need to integrate our militaries together via H.R. 8800, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2027, again, subsection 222 and 224. I mean, a little bit insane.
And sometimes we have interests that are misaligned. And what I've seen with the prime minister is that he aggressively asserts the interests of his country. Sometimes that means we're on the same page, and sometimes it means that we're not. And I think that our job as an administration, and certainly what the president has done, has been very clear about what is in our best interest. We have to fundamentally be focused on what is in the United States' best interest. So they've been a great partner in a lot of ways, but we also have to focus on what is in America's best interest, and where that diverges, we unfortunately, for the Israelis, have to choose the side of the American people, which we always do.
Unfortunately, we have to choose the side of the Americans instead of the Israeli people. Like, what? Unfortunately, we have to choose those dirty Americans that I serve. Basically, like, what? Why would he say that? Well, it made sense when you look at these pictures of J.D. Vance standing at the Wailing Wall wearing his kippah. And at the end of the day, when you look at it, these people don't believe in the Ten Commandments. J.D. Vance wants to run for president. But why? His wife, Usha Vance, is a full-on Indian, and they're trying to give this entire perception that they've converted to Christianity. But you didn't really learn about Noahide laws versus the Ten Commandments, did you? The Noahide laws are what they go by. You notice how they never really say Jesus Christ. They always say God, specifically. You know, little examples of this. And then you hear this rhetoric. Why would they speak more for Israel than America? Why would he say something like that? Unfortunately, we have to serve the interests of the American people. Unfortunately, why is that unfortunate? Why is it unfortunate that you have to put your own people first? How is it unfortunate that America should come first? This is why this man should never be the president. This is why we need a completely new Republican Party. We need a new Democrat Party. All of them need to be completely just changed, switched, just unseated, taken out of office, and replaced with somebody who actually is America first. Because these politicians are all Israel firsters. You know, J.D. Vance was funded by Peter Thiel. And at the end of the day, he was also basically, he like, nobody really knows where he came from. Wrote a book about his time as a young, like a middle-class kid or whatever, which, how real is that? Again, so we don't even know this guy. And ultimately, if you ask me, this is a man who's Israel first, and he will choose... he will work at the bequest of Israel at every single turn when he becomes president. If Donald Trump is already pretty much impenetrable when it comes to Israel first policy, and that guy is, again, President Trump, he seems to put Israel first all the time. Now, maybe that's not true. Maybe he's been in control of Netanyahu, but when we look at where things are at, it doesn't really look like it. Okay, so ultimately, it's something to think about, something to pay attention to. Why is it that J.D. Vance thinks it's unfortunate that America should come first? Just very concerning. Meanwhile, Israel used the World Cup opening to cover this strike and, again, targeted homes in Gaza. So, again, when we look into this story, always verify and fact-check everything, of course. But ultimately, this is kind of some footage from that. The Post claims Israel conducted airstrikes in Gaza on June 11, 2026, using the FIFA World Cup 2026 opening as a distraction, featuring video of large nighttime explosions and fireballs in the Deir al-Balah and al-Maghazi areas. Video frames use massive orange fireballs, rising smoke plumes, and sparks over the urban Gaza at night, with text labeling them as Israeli strikes targeting houses. A follow-up post by the author specifies agricultural land east Deir al-Balah with rubble aftermath photos. Reuters reports Israeli strikes killed 3 Palestinians in Gaza that day, including the one in Gaza City and others in Nusayrat camp, amid fragile ceasefire and renewed truce talks. And then again, yesterday, we had 16 that were killed in Lebanon. So this is what's going on. You're not supposed to know about it. You are not supposed to talk about this, but this is happening. And so perhaps this is why President Trump left Netanyahu out of this peace deal. We can only hope that President Trump is serious about that peace deal. Hasn't been proven to be true so far. But when we look at this, it's pretty wild. Israeli airstrikes target houses across Gaza. This one is in Deir al-Balah, to the south middle area of the Gaza Strip. So pretty wild. This is what is going on. So when you look at all of this footage, and then here's some pictures of that, this is what the Israelis are up to, while we are worrying about this war with Iran that the Israelis got us into. So is it really okay that we're just bending over for Israel like this? Ultimately, at the end of the day, if this peace deal is going to happen, if this deal with Iran is truly going to happen, one of the terms of the Iranians was that the Israelis have to stop striking Gaza, the people of Palestine, and then Lebanon. All of this must end. No more of it can continue. So these are part of the terms, and Israel has refused it every step of the way. And then they keep getting us involved in this, right? Think about how we struck Iran all over an Apache helicopter. Whose call was that? Was that really Trump's call? Maybe, maybe not. But ultimately, I find it to be extremely interesting and a little concerning. This is what Tucker Carlson had to say on Iran. This has been going viral on X. Iran is the only country standing up for the Palestinians and Lebanon. Definitely true.
Which is bombing Arab countries and destroying Arab countries.
It here.
Iran, which is bombing Arab countries and destroying Arab countries, is more popular in some Arab countries than it was at the beginning of the war. Now, how could that be? Well, because Iran has taken a clear position on the murder of Palestinian civilians, particularly in Lebanon, but not just Lebanon, in the West Bank and Gaza also. Iran has tied its ceasefire negotiations to a ceasefire in Lebanon. Now, that's not something that resonates with most Americans, like who cares? But in the Middle East and in the entire rest of the world, really, which is watching this, watching Israel destroy Lebanon for reasons that are not clear at all, murder Christians wholesale in Lebanon, destroy Christian villages, bomb Beirut, not a traditional Hezbollah stronghold. Why are you bombing Beirut? Unclear. But it's happening, and the rest of the world is watching carefully because Lebanon is a country a lot of...
Actually, that is clear, and I wanted to interject there because the reason that they are targeting Beirut and the reason that they are targeting Lebanon in general is for the Greater Israel Project. That is the objective. They want to conquer 7 countries within 5 years, and now it's they're just really expanding. The Israelis have used the other excuse of, southern Lebanon and the Golan Heights being a security buffer for the Israeli state, and they've essentially said that this place will be used for security purposes. But these are all UNIFIL controlled, and again, these are United Nations international centers. So essentially, these places are built every time these little villages are bombed and attacked. Again, we're going to look at some map footage, and we'll be looking at some satellite footage of what the grounds actually look like right now on maritime traffic and everything near Lebanon, where those battlegrounds are right now and everything that's happening. Because these villages have been completely wiped out. And again, a lot of Google Earth satellites aren't going to show you that, but that's happening. And again, everything Tucker's saying is true.
People have been to, probably the most beautiful country in the world, with some of the most sophisticated people in the world. It's not Yemen, it's Lebanon, it's on the Mediterranean. And the rest of the world is watching this in horror, and no one's doing anything about it. The United States is abetting it. The United States is helping it happen, despite what they tell you. Those are American weapons and weapon systems being used to murder Christians in Lebanon. Who is doing something about it? Iran. Hate to say that. Wish that weren't true. Wish it didn't fall to Iran to do something about this, but it has, and they are. And they're doing more about this than any other country, including ours, including any of the Gulf states, sorry. Because they are tying the reopening of the Strait, which the world wants, to an end to Israeli bombing and murder in Lebanon. So in the eyes of the region, whatever people hate about Iran, and there's a lot that the Arabs hate about Iran, they are uniquely standing up for the Palestinians. The mass murder in Gaza, the genocide in Gaza, and history will record it as that. It is genocide. It is a state policy to eliminate a people and transfer them out of a land. It is genocide by any definition. Is the biggest thing that is happening at this point in history. It is the biggest thing. It is the thing about which the most will be written going forward. How did the rest of the world watch this and do nothing? How did the United States back this? How did the United States become the only country on the planet, other than Israel, to approve of this genocide?
Right.
These are questions normal people will ask fairly soon. They're asking them now. And Iran, for all of its many faults, as an American, it's painful to admit this, has tried to do something about it. So long term, that doesn't hurt Iran, whatever their motive for doing that. That does not hurt Iran. That enhances Iran as a state.
Seriously. And at the end of the day, this entire Iran war, again, where is it going? Okay, at the end of the day, look at the markets. I mean, right now, these markets are being basically manipulated by Trump's statements and all of these, optics and whatnot. And we can only hope that the oil prices stay low here in America, of course. But, you have the WTI crude at $85.86, Brent crude at $90.38, Murban crude at $87.25. So you look at the oil prices and they look fine right now, but where is that going to go if this war continues and if we keep getting dragged into this Iran war, right? What happens when the Iranians choose to continue closing the strait for another 3 months, 6 months? We're pretty much already screwed as an economy. We are going to have a crash at some point. And as you can see from the cryptocurrency market, that's just one of these markets. And probably crypto in the future will have more of an emerging, appreciating market than the other markets. I see that this is more of a hedge. But when you look at this Iran war, the longer that we're in it, the worse off the entire, not just the United States economy, but the worse off the entire global economy is going to be. Okay, so Bitcoin's sitting at $63,616. Everybody thought that the prices would go up to $250,000 by the beginning of this year, right? Everybody thought that that was going to happen. But then all of this entire Iran war happened. And we were involved in all of this war. So all of that money, all of that inflow, all of everything the banks could have put money in for crypto and all these other markets, global markets too. Look at it now. You know, the markets are pretty much tanked, at least until July 4th, when there is the Senate Ethics Committee markup hearing date, if that even still happens. So Trump has been bragging about the stock market with this entire peace deal. We'll see if it actually happens, how true that is. Dow surges 900 points. NASDAQ, S&P 500 soar as Trump suggests deal with Iran is close. U.S. stocks surged after President Trump said he called off strikes planned for tonight against Iran and suggested a peace deal is close, and a stark reversal from the tensions that helped fuel the latest market sell-off. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose more than 900 points, or 1.8%. The benchmark S&P 500 moved up more than 1.7%, while the NASDAQ Composite led gains, climbing 2.5%. So when we look at the Dow Jones, it's good right now, but that's not what's important. What's most important is where the global economy is going. Where is the U.S. economy going, and what is this Iran war going to do to it? What is the economic? This is the strategy of the Iranians, is to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed, and basically to squeeze the global economy until basically everybody is blaming the United States for continuing this war, and Israel, of course, because Israel got us into this war. So you look at the gold prices right now, they're up a little bit, $4,210 an ounce. Silver's at $67.28 an ounce. But again, this is an economic war, really. With these choke points that are being closed off in the Strait of Hormuz right now, this is basically the strategy of the Iranians. So what's actually different? Let's take a look. Is there any traffic going through the Strait of Hormuz right now? And this will really tell us if what Trump's saying is true or not. See, to me, when I look at this looks the exact same. There are no ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. Everybody's anchored down. High congestion in the area of Fujairah over here. And again, all basically restricted airspace right here in Kasab. This entire area is still closed off. You have no flow through of traffic essentially through this Strait of Hormuz still. You have Qasem Island, which is this is what's been being attacked recently. These areas right here, again, these and a lot of basically power, energy. That's what's basically being hit right now in Qasem Island. All these different areas are being struck. Okay, so when you look at Qasem Island, this has been a big location of these U.S. strikes recently because the Iranians have their own blockade going on, and this area, this strait right here, and then again Larak Island, and then right here in that Persian Gulf coming right through that Strait of Hormuz. So again, this is where if you were seeing traffic going through the Strait of Hormuz right here, this would be a good sign. Right now, it looks like everybody is still anchored. Everything looks the same as it did yesterday. Nothing really looks any different. As a matter of fact, there looks like there is probably more congestion in these areas. Okay, so you have more anchored down crude oil tankers. You can tell the crude oil tankers or the product shipping tankers by these different red dots you see. Any red dots means that they're anchored. The triangles mean that they're in movement. But there's very limited movement, very limited motion, and to the extent that people are moving in the Strait of Hormuz or the Persian Gulf, it's very, very limited. Okay, you have a lot of buildup over here in Qatar, which is a big ally of the United States. Again, they've been getting hit hard because the Iranians see them as betrayers of the Arabic people. Again, this is the same thing with Saudi Arabia, same thing with Oman. And again, you know, you're looking at all these different countries. Bahrain, that's also been a big target for these strikes, these Iranian strikes. And again, that's because they're siding with the United States and Israel. And again, against their Arabic brothers. That's the way they see it. So when you see this entire Persian Gulf, it doesn't really look like anything's changed from the last episodes that we've been looking at this entire Persian Gulf. Okay, we still have the same exact ships anchored down right here. They've been anchored here for weeks, it seems. Same spot, same amount of ships just about. Pretty crazy. You have Kuwait over here that's also been getting struck. So that's why insurance companies are not wanting to send these ships through the Strait of Hormuz. They don't want to send them. They don't want to waste the money. They don't want to get into that situation. And then again, of course, we have Donald Trump, who said he wanted to take Karg Island, but he quoted that the American people, he didn't think that the American people had the stomach for it. That it remains to be seen as to whether or not Trump is even going to attack Karg Island. But the reason he would is because it is a big power facility. And this is where a lot of imports and exports travel. And basically, in Trump's mind, if we control this, we're apparently going to be able to control the entire region. I don't really see that as possible. Okay, ultimately, it's going to basically leave a big, fat target on U.S. troops and U.S. soldiers. Not really the smartest tactics. Ultimately, there needs to be diplomacy. That's how this war is going to be done. And these negotiations have been destroyed by J.D. Vance and Trump because they keep going back on their word and flip-flopping and bending over for Israel, really. Okay, we also have the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which the IRGC has basically threatened to close. And if this closes, look at all these ships in here that are stuck, trapped. They won't be able to get to the Suez Canal either, to the north. So think about that. All of these ships that you see in the Red Sea here, just on the west coast of Saudi Arabia, all these ships, where are they going to go? Where are they going to go? They're not going to have many places to go. Again, we still have a lot of anchored down vessels here in Port Said. Okay, and again, the Strait of Hormuz has very limited traffic going through it. A lot of anchored down vessels. So nothing has really changed. Nothing has changed. Everything is the same as yesterday. Despite Trump's rhetoric and his statements, I guess we have to wait for the weekend. We have to wait to see what is going to happen Saturday. Will there be a peace deal signed in Europe? Because if that happens, then there's probably going to be some positive movements with trade. But until that happens, it's all just talk. Okay, we have limited maritime traffic going to, limited maritime traffic in the Mediterranean here. So again, you have traffic going to Tel Aviv, of course. No traffic going to Gaza. Again, don't forget that the Israelis literally said that there will be no more aid that is allowed to enter Gaza. Think about that for a minute. No more aid is allowed to enter Gaza. That is what the Israelis said on Monday. And so when you see what's really happened here, it's pretty wild. So again, when we zoom in, you can kind of see just how bad some of these areas have actually gotten. Okay. So some of these different areas that we're going to be looking at here, for example, you can see look at all the tents. You can see all these little tents that people are living in, the people of Gaza and Palestine. These are all tents, mostly. Some of these are buildings, some of these are houses, but most of these are tents. A lot of these areas have been bulldozed over. Might just not be in the right area. I think we're getting to it, though. So ultimately, when we drag this over, we can really see where a lot of this starts to happen. So right here, for example, these are areas of Gaza that were completely wiped out. Okay? And a lot of Lebanon looks like this too right now. So when you look at this map, and when you look at these areas, a lot of Gaza looks like this. And so why do you think they're not bringing in aid to Gaza? There's a reason. Because this is where new Gaza is going to be. This is all about the Abraham Accords at the end of the day. It incentivizes. It's an incentive for Trump to basically keep this war going, because ultimately there's going to be a lot of new real estate being built on this shoreline, okay, here in Gaza. So a lot of destruction has happened here, specifically for the purposes of real estate to be built there. And that's what this war is all about. So I'd be surprised if this peace deal stayed, because again, with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff negotiating this entire deal, I don't really see how that's going to happen. They are planning for real estate development in the area of Gaza. Going to build a Trump Tower there, maybe, hotels, and ultimately, as the Kushners are already buying one of the islands on Albania, the same thing will happen to Gaza. And then what do you think they're going to do in Lebanon? So Lebanon has also been being struck. So when we zoom out, and let's look at Lebanon real quick. We look at Lebanon on the map. We're getting there. So they really want the southern border. The Israelis want this southern border of Lebanon. This is what they've been striking. Okay, right here, fat dead center of the southwest corner of Lebanon, you have this UNIFIL HQ Nakora. And you have a ton of UN centers just like this, all around these areas of which have been basically completely pillaged, right? And it's really weird connection there. Google will tell you that, oh, well, this is because UNIFIL protects these areas. Well, why is it always just near a war zone? It's always right near a war zone or a battleground. So it's very interesting how you see these little villages that are just completely pillaged, destroyed, and ultimately, again, nothing is really done about it. Nobody really talks about it because people are afraid to. And at the same time, you can find these little zones all over southern Lebanon. You can see where forest fires were started. You can see the little patches in the forests. You see the new earth, geography changes. We literally have an op lab right here. What do you think that's for? Seriously, weird stuff going on. You have signs of bulldozers being built there. UNP 131, there's another UN center. So as you go along the southern border of Lebanon, you find a ton of these. Again, this is signs of a forest fire right here. As we zoom into this, that's a forest fire. So very interesting. You see the geography. You can see where all these battlegrounds have been taking place. Okay, so pretty much any city you zoom in on, over the past decade, this has been pretty much going on. These buildings being bombed, attacked, destroyed. Villages, same thing. Mostly Christian villages, too, simultaneously with Blitzkrieg. And so when you look at that, quite interesting. They call this Pizza Point here. And then you look at this, pretty wild. Again, more buildings pillaged in this area, as you can see. So very, very interesting. And almost every little village you see, you'll find every village you see that's pillaged, you'll see these little UN centers somewhere. If you zoom in close enough, if you look in the right places. A lot of the roads themselves are already UN controlled. So it's like, are they working as proxies for the Israelis, or are they truly trying to actually secure the area? We covered this before. But again, now that the story is more relevant, again, boom, right here. There you go, UNP 1A, 10A. And then right next to it, you have another village that's been pillaged and destroyed. What is with that? Very strange. And this is all by the doing of the Israelis versus Hezbollah versus the small Lebanese army, which is basically their own people. But you could see these are all signs of detonations, all signs of either missile strikes, simultaneous detonations. Because, you see a lot of new earth here, right? And you see that there's literally pillage everywhere. There's signs of bricks, buildings that are no longer there. You have lots in certain places that used to be there that are no longer there. So again, the Israelis are taking all of this land in these small villages, and they're taking it all. Because these were once Arabic communities, and then somewhat Islamic, somewhat Muslim, somewhat Christian. So you had a mix of these. But meanwhile, you have this entire war happening. And this goes on and on and on throughout the entire southern border. All of this has basically been destroyed. You won't find a lot of these map images when you look on Google Earth. But this is really what we're looking at. Pretty insane. That could be your hometown. Who's to say that the Israelis won't do this to Americans when they want to, when they can? Because we already have intelligence that the Israelis are already looking to do this first chance they get to Americans. And we have, Discord chats where people are basically, Israelis are saying this. And I won't get into too much detail on that. But ultimately, this is the severity of this issue. Almost everywhere you zoom in on in southern Lebanon, you'll see that buildings are pillaged, destroyed, and it looks like you're literally in a war zone. And then you'll find these UN centers if you look close enough and hard enough. Pretty wild. So again, this goes on throughout the entire southern border. We covered hardly anything. But again, they've moved all the way upwards, northwards of Tyre, right here where my cursor is, and then all the way to the east of Odessa. And what's interesting about Odessa, another village that's basically been completely pillaged and destroyed, so much damage here, as you can see, there's actually a little observation point that they've renamed into an Israeli statehood place. Right here, the Odessa sign, Odessa Israel Observation Point. So very interesting. And again, this comes after, and these were two different towns at one point. Okay, so now it's called Odessa, but it actually used to be called something else completely. Pretty crazy. You can see that some of these areas are like literally in the middle of a war zone. You can't really deny it. You can see that there's been demolitions, there's been explosions, you can see smoke in the sky in some areas, and no, those aren't clouds, because the reason you can tell is because of the different coloration of those clouds. But this is happening, and this is just eastern southern Lebanon, southeastern Lebanon. So again, they went all the way upwards from Tyre to Odessa to Nabateh, this entire area where my cursor is, essentially. So this is how much land that the Israelis have pretty much conquered. And they want this for a security buffer zone, they say. Very interesting. Well, I think it's more for the Greater Israel Project. And that's really the issue with this entire thing. Is this why the Israelis are not being really invited into this entire deal? Again, we have a lot of strikes happening on Beirut. They're trying to take strategic points and strategic cities in order to really take as much of Lebanon as they can. And then once they take Lebanon, they want Turkey next. So, and they've been very clear about that. Okay? And so, again, Turkey's not too far away, right across. So, again, there's Israel. You have a little bit of Lebanon. And then what happens when you just cross the sea? Boom. You're already into Turkey. Okay? And if they can take all of Lebanon, then they already own Syria, basically. The Israelis already, pretty much by proxy, control these Syrians. So very interesting to look at what's happening here. There's going to be a lot of big developments that come in the future when it comes to this conversation in Turkey and what the Israelis are going to do. So all of this has to do with the Strait of Hormuz and why it is important that Trump succeeds in this peace deal. Because if not, then this war is going to get sporty. And it's going to get hot even sooner than it already is. So it's already hot. The war's already hot. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's one of the biggest concerns we have right now, is that, again, even the Pentagon has labeled Israel the highest of national security threat to the United States, in which they are at this current time in history. We have nothing against Jews, but this is what's happening right now as we speak. So let's look at some breaking news. Here's the clip of Donald Trump claiming that the war in Iran ended today and that they've agreed to never have a nuclear weapon.
Agreed never to have a nuclear weapon.
We didn't cover this yet.
We insisted on that was the whole purpose. That was a 95 honor, and the country is doing really well. I don't know if you heard, but we ended the war with Iran today, and they have agreed never to have a nuclear weapon, something that we insisted on. That was the whole purpose. That was 95% of it. And they've done it in the most powerful way you can do it. So I just want to thank everybody for the honor, and the country is doing really well. I don't know if you heard, but we ended.
So yes. So we have that clip. Then breaking news 51 minutes ago, explosions reported in the Strait of Hormuz as Iran's IRGC Navy forced a tanker to comply with its transit ban. This isn't a warning spot on paper. Iran enforced its choke point control with live action. They claim the ship was warned and forced to comply with transit ban. Iran says they are monitoring the strait and will deal firmly with any attempts to break it. And again, that story comes from Al Jazeera. And so again, it doesn't look like this war is ending anytime soon. I've been saying this for weeks, that this war is only going to continue on. You have to think about the Abraham Accords. Remember the Abraham Accords. Remember who's in control of the negotiations truly, behind closed doors, the people you're not supposed to know about, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. Those are the people you need to focus on. Who benefits from, this war ending? Really, the American people and the entire world, but not Trump, right? Not Netanyahu. And it would actually benefit Trump. It would benefit his legacy at the very least. But it's crazy because he has chosen to continue this war. At this point, he's saying that they've ended the war, that there's going to be a peace deal. We'll see if that's even true. But ultimately, I don't know about it. Belfast's explosive unrest has now reached America. Fox News is now leading coverage of the growing crisis in Northern Ireland as images of burning vehicles, street clashes, and mass demonstrations spread across the world. What started with a brutal attack has become a story that is dominating internal headlines. Tonight, Belfast is no longer just Northern Ireland's story. It's a global story. Yeah. And what's interesting is that the Irish government said, we didn't want that video getting out there. We didn't want people knowing about it. And it was actually very sad to see that the people of Ireland were willing to just take such a approach and hurt our useful immigrants who love us so much. And it's like, well, they really don't, right? Because this poor man was almost killed. So again, honestly, I won't get into it because YouTube will flag the content if it's too graphic, but ultimately that's what's going on. So again, a lot of civil war, you could say, is happening. I wouldn't call it civil war. I would call it a war between the British people, the UK, the Europeans versus the non-Europeans, the want to be Europeans, the immigrants, the illegal immigrants, whatever you want to call it. Some of them legal immigrants, but you know, people who are completely from a different place who are saying that they're from Africa, and then they say that they're British. You know, it's like, well, you know, come on. So you look at all of this, it's very interesting. So when we look at all this breaking news, it's pretty crazy. Lot going on today. So a lot of race baiting when it comes to the Twitter X algorithm today when we're looking at everything. That's at least what I'm getting. I see a lot of that happening. Ultimately, though, very interesting. So let's go to the bookmarks, because everything on Twitter is pretty much just racial stuff and war in Belfast. And ultimately, what happened in Belfast is tragic, but the people of Ireland have a right to stand up for their rights and their people and their land. And anybody who disagrees with that, just, you know, you are kind of a complete enemy to your own state and your own nation. You know, these liberals and the Irish government is just selling out to these foreigners who are taking over by numbers, and they are raping the women. They are completely destroying everything in that city. And so now, and again, they're killing innocent white people. And so the innocent white people are finally rising up, and they are rising against their government, which is not okay. You know, ultimately, you know, we don't condone violence at all. And obviously I condemn violence. But at the same time, it is important to note that somebody cares and that the people care, because what's happening is tragic, and there needs to be some kind of reaction. This is a message to the Irish government that if you abandon your people, then this is going to happen. And if you throw your native people under the bus, they're going to rebel against you. This is what history tells us. So again, I don't condone the violence, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's important that there is some kind of action being done, because what's happening over there is tyranny, pure tyranny. And over here in the United States, it's really not that much different. French authorities say an Israeli called Black Corps is suspected of running online influence campaigns in multiple countries. According to France's Vigneum disinformation watchdog, the company is linked to operations targeting elections in New York City, Scotland, as well as activities in Angola and Togo. French officials have asked Israel for help with the investigation. You asked Israel for help, but have not identified who hired or directed the operations. Oh, they asked Israel for help. That's suspicious. That's not suspicious at all. So again, we covered that. Well said. The government of Ireland better listen to the people, or it's just going to get worse. So again, speaking more on this is kind of a pretty good video. And this is what the people of Ireland need to aspire to. And people of Ireland need to wake up and realize that your country is being overtaken. Your country is completely being overtaken by tyrants. And ultimately, at the end of the day, there does need to be some kind of peaceful revolution.
People took to the streets in a way that we haven't seen before. People left their homes, they left their families, they left their livelihoods to stand up for themselves and for their communities, demanding a better Ireland. And how dare ye ignore the people again here today? Ye talk about Sinn Féin, but you don't talk about the people. It was the people that went out and said enough is enough. It was the people who had to take to the streets to demand action. And it was the people who said they have no confidence in yous. But not one of you here spoke to the people here today. Instead, you spoke to and about yourselves. When I thought about your disastrous response last week, I thought it couldn't get any worse. But the fact that you locked Galway representatives out of a meeting is absolutely shameful. Do you even realise how disrespectful that was? Do you understand the blind arrogance that ye showed? It was like something out of a schoolyard. You were saying, well, I'll talk to those, but I won't talk to them. And having spent time on these protests in Galway, I had perhaps thought that maybe a sense of clarity would have descended on this Dáil, a sense of clarity that the people had. But obviously this hasn't happened. Ye have doubled down. Ye have spent your time during this debate with your chests out and beating the same old drum of how great ye are. are, but the people are wise to ye. They know exactly what ye are at. They heard the words of the Taoiseach, the Taoiseach and the Minister for Justice last week. But I tell you now, the people know whose side you're on, and they know that ye are not on their side.
100%. And that's all 100% true. Again, Ireland is under tyranny right now, and their government is letting in all of this cheap foreign labor because they want to pretend that these people are being helpful to the community, but they're not. These people are highly violent, and these are migrant men of military age, and they do not assimilate. They do not care about Ireland. And I say this as somebody who has Irish DNA and Scottish DNA and German DNA, a lot of European DNA, Swedish, Finnish. Ultimately, it's important that we preserve our identity and our nationalistic heritage. You know, it is important that we honor our ancestors and the land that they have lived there for thousands of years, instead of these allowing politicians who want to get more, like basically get rich and make more money or get power or whatever. They're selling out their country for these things and materialistic pride. And some of them, just not even that, they're just being blackmailed and they're completely owned by people who are even worse. So they make these decisions and let in all these people, and it destroys the nation. It destroys the country. And then who comes in? All of these illegal immigrants and the people that they invite in, they get more rights than the native people. So it's wrong. It needs to be fought against. And ultimately, you know, we can never let this happen in America. It's already happening in America. It needs to be spoken out against because it's absolutely unacceptable at the end of the day. So is the violence. But, you know, at the end of the day, this is the result of a tyrannical, corrupt government. Another breaking news story. After giving testimony in Congress via the Epstein files, someone told Bill Gates, "Follow Jesus, stop being a baby flesh eater." The Microsoft founder has certainly seen better days. So again, this is a clip from Bill Gates' testimony, allegedly. Somebody had said this.
Follow Jesus, Bill. Stop being a baby flesh eater.
Yikes. Makes me think of the video where Bill Gates got the pie thrown in his face. Let's bring up that video. Where's the video where Bill Gates got the pie thrown in his face? Bill Gates, pie in face. Get a kick out of this every time I see it. We need to do this to these people again.
Gates arriving for a meeting with community leaders. Watch what happens.
The reason we need to do this to people like Bill Gates is because Bill Gates is the same person who said we need to get the population to zero. We need to literally lower the population to zero. Bill Gates has said that. Bill Gates was a big part of and essentially, you know, was the one who encouraged this entire virus and this pandemic, all of these things that happened in 2020. Essentially, it was him who was behind it, as well as Dr. Fauci. These people were behind this entire thing. And then they were the ones who said, no, it doesn't work to wear a mask. You can't wear a mask. It doesn't work. And this was all in the emails. And they said it right on TV. And then, you know, people were still brainwashed by the woke mind virus, telling you that you need to wear a mask. This is the way we need to handle those people.
When a team
personally
of hitmen meet him first with a pie in the face.
This is the right way to respond. Like, honestly. This is what these
Gates
people
was momentarily
deserve.
and understandably shaken, but he was not injured. The hit squad was momentarily and...
Seriously. Isn't it beautiful? It could be so easy.
Gates was momentarily and understandably shaken, but he was not injured. The hit squad piled on with two more pies.
Got him. Like, this is the answer to tyrants. This is how we should respond to these people. He's not dead. He didn't get hurt. He just got humiliated. And rightfully so. Did you guys know that Bill Gates was the one who created the first ever computer virus? The first one who basically created the first ever computer virus so that he can create an antivirus software for it. And that's why this guy deserves this. And this is how we need to be treating these politicians. This is how we need to be treating corrupt members of government, corrupt CEOs, people who are selling out America and who are, you know, Israel first or not America first, anybody like that. And anybody who doesn't worship God and they just worship themselves as gods. This is how they should be treated. Bill Gates, you got what you deserved, brother. And better hope it doesn't happen again. I bet every day he goes in to talk to somebody, he's looking for a pie. I bet he's really against pie these days. Pretty crazy. So again, another big story. This came out on X. President Johnson admitted to Newsweek that the attack on the USS Liberty was deliberate, but Jews blackmailed him into saying it was an accident. After this incident, the Jews in Johnson's inner circle spied on Johnson and relayed any new intelligence about the USS Liberty attack to Israel. These Jews were Democrat fundraiser Abe Feinberg, U.S. Ambassador to the UN Arthur Goldberg, U.S. lawyer David Ginsburg, and Supreme Court Justice Abe Fortas. These were Israeli agents posing as Americans. Like Jonathan Pollard said, all Jews have a dual loyalty. So very interesting. So take a look at this video where it talks about President Lyndon Johnson and kind of how the USS Liberty actually kind of went down.
The fact
it was especially tough for Lyndon Johnson, to date, the most pro-Israeli American president in history.
Johnson was in a very tough mood. I'm Tom Hughes. I was director in the State Department, director of intelligence and research at the time of the Liberty incident in '67. Attack on the Liberty, Johnson himself briefed Newsweek magazine off the record that the Israelis had attacked, and the reason they'd attacked was that they thought this was an intelligence ship that was intercepting perhaps Israeli as well as Egyptian communications.
But then everything changed.
The fact that Johnson himself was the leaker and briefer of Newsweek was soon leaked. And this alarmed, of course, the Israeli embassy and their leading friends in the Jewish organizations. The Israeli embassy regarded this as a major problem, and that what Johnson had told Newsweek practically amounted to blood libel.
Declassified Israeli documents show they were going to threaten President Johnson with blood libel, gross anti-Semitism, and that would end his political career.
Maybe like JFK a little bit.
Blackmail. This is Admiral Bobby.
Number one way to control. This is how countries are won. This is how you control a nation, is by blackmail. This is how people and human beings are controlled. And the Israelis understand this. This is why you don't do stupid stuff in your life. This is why you live like an angel. You should live like a body cam is always on you, because it is. You should live like a camera is always on you. Everybody or somebody is always watching. Even when you're alone in your house, alone in your room, somebody's watching you at all times. Even if it's God himself, everybody sees what you're doing. So don't do stupid things that are going to get you blackmailed, because then these things happen. You try to run for government, you try to do something powerful, and it gets used against you.
I'm a former director of the National Security Agency. But they know if he is thinking about running again, he's going to need money for his campaign.
Sounds like Trump.
Alleging that he's blood libeling is going to arouse the Jewish donors.
This sounds like exactly like Donald Trump. Who did Donald Trump take $250 million from to win the election this past round? It was Maria Adelson. Okay. And what about not Ben Shapiro? What about Marco Rubio? Marco Rubio. He took money from Seth Adelson. So you look at these individuals, and they've taken money from the Israeli government. You look at AIPAC and FARA, which allows these foreign governments to come in and to fund all of these politicians. And from your seat, you say, well, these people are just getting money because they want to run for politics. But it's like, well, there's actually a deeper story. And maybe this is something close to that.
The Israeli government hired teams of lawyers, some of whom were close friends of Lyndon Johnson, and began an all-out offensive. They lent on the media to kill critical stories and slanted others in favor of Israel.
There was a campaign mounted to see if what could be done about returning Johnson to his normal, predictable pro-Israeli position.
At the time, Johnson was still undecided as to whether to run for president the following year.
Efforts were to be made to remind the president of the delicacy of his own position, that he personally might lose support for his run for re-election in 1968.
Israeli tactics were
And it goes on. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what's happening today, isn't it? That's what's happening today in the United States of America. And then you look at this clip. This was just 14 hours ago. This is a clip of Thomas Massey. And basically, he's with a bunch of USS Liberty survivors. Listen to this clip. Maybe you didn't see this yet on X, but it's been going viral.
And then a quick question for obviously the survivors here. What does it mean to have your story told at the Capitol? How long have you waited for this?
59 years. We've been lobbying Congress for 59 years, but no member of Congress will give us the time of day.
Why do you think that is?
I have no idea.
Israel owns us.
Rob, hold the microphone up. Hold the microphone up.
The crew was ordered to secrecy, not to talk to anybody, their wives, even each other. We were not. They weren't allowed to talk. I was injured seriously at the beginning, so I didn't get Admiral Kidd's thing. But he told them, if you talk to anybody, you can plan on spending the rest of your life in the brig or worse. He threatened them with that order.
Insane.
And luckily for us, the admiral that did the commissioned officers only said till the day he died, and 15 years later he died, and then we started talking.
So why does the USS Liberty matter so much? Why am I talking about the USS Liberty? Why now? Well, because the USS Liberty anniversary was just Monday, and ultimately 57-year anniversary of the USS Liberty attack, where 171 soldiers were wounded, sailors were wounded, and 2 of them were Marines on the ship. And again, there were over 800 holes from firepower in that ship. And it was proven that the Israelis had everything to do with it. And so again, the Israelis basically, they blamed, oh, well, this was an accident. Oh, it was the fog of war. And that is what Google will tell you. That is what Grok AI will tell you. That is what ChatGPT will tell you. Because who owns the AI companies today? You need to be careful about what you're researching, what you're looking at. But ultimately, with the USS Liberty, this entire incident matters today because what happened with this Apache helicopter just 2 days ago, where Donald Trump basically said, nope, we're striking Iran. They struck a U.S. Apache helicopter, and then the Iranians literally didn't even take credit for it. Why would they lie about that? If the Iranians did shoot down an Apache helicopter, wouldn't that make them look more powerful? Why would they lie about that? Why would they not take credit for that? Why would they deny doing it? Well, it's because, again, maybe there's another actor involved. Notice how the Israelis were very silent that day. And also they were busy doing their own thing in Lebanon and in Gaza. They have their own occupations happening. We have 2 different wars. We have a multi-domain war being fought right now. Okay, so ultimately, that's what's going on. And that's why the USS Liberty is so important. Maybe this entire Apache helicopter, Operation Epic Fury, this entire thing was truly designed to get the Americans into a 20-year war that's going to keep us into a war with Iran for the next 20 years, deplete our entire military stockpile, all of our technology, and while at the same time integrating the Israeli military into our military with HR 8800, and at the same time simultaneously, basically, for 20 years, keeping the Americans fighting these Iranians, when the Iranians have no interest in fighting the Americans. The Iranians would rather fight the Israelis. But when you have the Americans on the Israeli side, it's this 20-year war. And guess what? A country loses its power from war. Ultimately, you lose power. You don't gain power from a war. Truly, you might gain power from being the victor of the war. But that is only one side who wins, ultimately, at the end of the day. And that side typically rewrites the histories. So what we're seeing now is a war where we're being basically strong-armed into this Iran war. And Trump, hopefully, is trying to get us out of it. When I look at Trump, I see the same thing happening. I see the same Lyndon Johnson story where he's being potentially blackmailed via the Epstein files. And we have all of these interesting things. Jeffrey Epstein was a Jew. He was an Israeli Jew. And ultimately, he was a rabbi. We understand that from his own interview. I've covered it on my show, on my channel. And so when you look at this, it's kind of quite shocking. And what's even more crazy about the Epstein files is that none of these people, again, they didn't really, it's not like they were even blackmailed. They wanted to be a part of it, or at least they were lured into it, right? You have Howard Lutnick, who's always standing behind Trump's shoulder, right? And today, when Donald Trump signed the peace deal, right? Let's go back to it. Who's standing right there behind Trump? Howard Lutnick, as always, with his smile. always smiling, always loves to give that cheeky smile. He's always up to something. This is the same man who, again, Howard Lutnick, the guy standing right behind Trump right now on his right side here, where my cursor is, that same man basically made a bunch of money on 9/11 from the towers collapsing. Isn't that interesting? It was the one day Howard Lutnick did not go to work, and he went to go take his daughter to school, allegedly. But he never misses work, and he lost 700 employees that day. But he made a lot of money. And then, just this past year, with his son's company, Cantor Fitzgerald, we also find out that that same company basically was the beneficiary of all of the tariff buybacks that were in play. So the Supreme Court said that the tariff buybacks are, or basically the tariffs are unconstitutional. You can't do them. So somebody had to buy them, and it was Cantor Fitzgerald. Cantor Fitzgerald essentially bought back all of the tariff revenue, and they made billions of dollars. And that's why you never got your $5,000 check, taxpayer, you know? And so who are they cutting taxes for, by the way? When you hear the Republicans saying, well, we're cutting taxes. Well, they're cutting them for the rich. Nothing against the rich, truly. I'm not somebody who believes in eat the rich. But isn't it interesting that it is the only people who won when it came to the tariff buybacks was the rich. And really, it was just Howard Lutnick. It was the Lutnick family. Okay? You have to pay attention to who these players actually are. And so what you're seeing with Donald Trump is the same incident. This is a man who appears to be totally controlled by the Israelis. And again, there have been members of the Mossad who have said the same thing, that Donald Trump is basically compromised and that he was in the Epstein files, and they used that against him. And Trump is basically doing what he can and doing whatever they want him to do in order to keep that information out of the public eye, which inevitably is going to be released probably right after he is either taken out of office and unseated or possibly even impeached soon. And again, I like Trump. I voted for him 3 times. I want him to do great, but this is just the truth. This is what happens. This is what you're not supposed to know. And this is why, you know, my channel might not get the most views, but ultimately this is absolutely exactly what's happening. So very, very crazy events that are happening. But what we're seeing is truly an occupation of our government by the Israelis.
And then a quick question.
And so
for obviously
this needs to be fought against. And until that happens, we will continue this war with Iran via the Abraham Accords and Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff essentially orchestrating this entire real estate transaction. And in response, Israel will be the next superpower, and they will own the trade in the Middle East. U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, the best friends that Israel has are Bible-believing evangelical Christians, especially from America. I don't want us to ever lose that edge. I don't want the Christians of the United States to forget that our reason for standing with Israel is not political. That's so not true. Because, again, we have the Schofield Bible, which, again, basically was written specifically for this time today. So that way, one day, for this war, these little scriptures that were changed throughout the Bible would be used for political purposes. And so now we're seeing that unfold today. And, you know, Mike Huckabee likes to say that, well, Christianity was based on Judea, was built on Jewish values, which it is. Ultimately, Jesus was a Jew, according to the histories. But also, he is completely against what the Jews were doing in that time, okay? And so a lot of these Jews don't understand that, okay? So what was Jesus doing? He flipped the tax tables. He had whipped his own people. He told the Pharisees, you are the sons of Satan, and you're the synagogue of Satan. Okay, you who are Jews, who are not Jews, but say you are Jews. You know, these are all biblical quotes of the Christ himself, who is the king of the Jews. That even the Jews called him the king of the Jews. And so truly, when the Jews stopped worshiping Jesus Christ, that is when, according to the New Testament, they lost their land. They lost the right to be called the chosen people. This is also in the Bible. So as soon as the Jews basically crucified Christ, their prophet, of whom was already basically given to them by God, and essentially made and manifested into God on earth, especially through resurrection, that was the proof of life on earth, proof of life after earth, all of these things confirmed by not just the apostles, but also the people in the area. Pontius Pilate even wrote scriptures about Jesus Christ resurrecting. Very weird stuff. And so when the Jews rejected Christ, and they believed that he was this a lot of the Jews believe that Jesus Christ is not the true God, and because of this, it has led to all of this turmoil. And so they believe that Christ is a false Messiah. They believe that Jesus was essentially an idol, and that Christians are idol worshipers. This is the belief of the Jews. So I have nothing against the Jews, but this is what's happening today. This is where these misconceptions lie. So ultimately, we have to understand that when Mike Huckabee says, oh, you can't be a Christian and then not be fond of the Jewish people, that's not even what people are saying. That's not what Christians are saying, Mike Huckabee. What people are saying is that the Jews have lost their way. What people are saying is that without Christ, there is no Jews. The real Jews, technically, if there was a real definition of Jews, would be the Christians today. The real chosen people would be the Christians today. And those are the people who believe in Jesus Christ, God, the man who was manifested into God on earth. He was perfect. He was sinless. And so when he died for our sins and resurrected 3 days later, this created the entire New Testament. That's why it exists. That's why to this day, our very timeline is based on the entire life of Jesus Christ and not all of these other prophets. And even to the Torah or the Talmud, it is based on Jesus Christ. And so the Jews have their own timeline that they follow, but overall, the entire world follows the lineage of Jesus Christ and his line and his death. And so that's why you have before Christ, after death, BC AD. So all of this stems off Christianity. Christianity is the true God. Christianity is the true way. Judaism is the antithesis of Christianity. It is typically more the worship of the materialistic things and the worship of Saturn. This is what the Jews believe. They believe that there is a black cube on Saturn that they control, and they believe that they are the rulers of the materialistic world. And so truly, they are in some ways, not to say this in an evil way, but they would technically be, by theological studies, technically the antichrists, because they reject Christ, and everything that they believe in is the opposite of Christians. They believe in the Noahide laws versus the Ten Commandments. This is why in politics, you have so many politicians who will say they will worship God all day. They will appear to have Christian values, but they go off of the Noahide laws. And what are the Noahide laws? So let's go down a little rabbit hole. So the Noahide laws. So when we look at the Noahide laws, they're very similar. There's 7 laws, at least for the Gentiles. The actual Noahide law, the Noahide laws are really 7 commandments for the Christians or Gentiles to follow, while the Jews apparently have their own set of laws, over 623, I believe, different laws that they have to follow. And so this is kind of their own beliefs. And so I'm trying to look for just a basic list of the Noahide laws here. It's typically a lot of media, but sometimes they delete a lot of this. Where are the Noahide laws? Looking for a list of them. But again, if you search this stuff up on X, you can find all the research all day long, and you can see everything that I'm talking about. Here we go. So these are essentially the Noahide laws. These are supposed to be the laws of the Gentile. These are the laws that the Gentiles must follow, while the Jews have to follow over like 623 laws, apparently. No idolatry, no blasphemy, no murder, no sexual immorality, no theft, respect God's creatures, establish courts of justice. So here's what's interesting about these Noahide laws. Then why aren't the Jews following it today? The Israelis specifically, not all Jews, but the Israelis. How come the Israelis aren't following the no murder law? That's kind of my thing. I don't understand that. And you also have sexual immorality. Well, why are the Jews today, the modern day Jewish movement, the liberal Jewish movement, you could call that Marxism, Bolshevism, or communism in many ways, why do these believe in the LGBTQ and they started the LGBTQ movement? Isn't that against the same Noahide laws? So if we're going by Jewish doctrines here, then how come these laws are violated every day? No theft. Well, you have the Israelis and you have the Hilltop Youth in Israel today who are stealing land from these Palestinians. And they believe that it's not stealing in their subjective mind because they believe that this is their land. They believe that the land of the Palestinians is the land of the Jewish people. But what is with that? Isn't that theft? You're stealing somebody's home, And so, again, they believe they've owned that land for thousands of years. So in their subjective mind, they don't believe it's stealing. But again, it is, right? Establish courts of justice. And then today we don't have justice. We have courts that actually believe in the complete opposite. But yet our courts are built off of the Noahide laws. We are violating even the Noahide laws that the Jews put in place for us in this country. Very interesting. And not we, but the Jews in power, I would say, more so. Not all Jews, to be very clear. I'm not an anti-Semite. I am a Christian. I'm a Catholic. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is just the truth. So, Mike Huckabee just has so much to learn about the Holy Bible and the Torah. And honestly, he probably knows nothing about the Torah. He's probably never read the Torah. I've read parts of the Torah. I've read a lot of this. So honestly, it's a complicated history lesson. It's very interesting and fascinating. But, he is somebody who's been led astray for sure. So anyways, that's the end of this episode. I'm going to end it there because we've been going on for a little bit now. And so there's a lot more news. Actually, you know what? We'll just look for any more breaking news real quick, see if anything new is in the algorithm. See if anything new popped along. Let's see. So let's look at the notifications, some of our best media aggregators here. Not seeing anything new here. This war in Iran is the worst foreign policy blunder since Iraq. Blah, blah, blah. Seeing if there's any breaking news, breaking strikes, or anything like that. So again, Israel is in charge. They control Trump. That's what Tucker Carlson had to say. Go watch that episode on Mario Nawfal's YouTube channel. Good episode. Yeah, so it doesn't look like there's any new news here. Trump wants Congress to erase 2 impeachments. Constitutional experts agree a resolution like that means nothing legally. The Constitution has no mechanism for undoing impeachment, 0. So Republicans would be forced to relitigate incitement and abuse of power charges. So it doesn't look like there's any breaking news in the past few hours here. So exactly after Bill Gates testifies, the victims funded by the Tides Foundation that is funded by the Gates Foundation broadsides Todd Blanche instead of Bill Gates, the man who drugged his wife so he wouldn't get the STDs he got from the Russian hooker he banged at, and then it doesn't say anything more. So again, that's just from that's from Jack Posobiec on X. He had posted that, retweeting Aaron Parnas, who had said Epstein survivors released statement blasting Todd Blanche following the revelation that he worked alongside the White House to protect Trump from the Epstein files. Let's see. Maybe we'll end it with this. So we'll read this. For immediate release, June 11th, 2026, Epstein survivors respond to senior administration officials' involvement in containing the Epstein story. In response to new revelations that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and other senior law enforcement officials met in the Situation Room to strategize about containing the Epstein story, survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's abuse released the following statement. We are deeply disturbed to learn that so many senior members of the administration gathered in the Situation Room to discuss the release of the Epstein files as the reputational problem rather than an opportunity to pursue investigation leads and try to figure out what actually happened. These revelations confirm our worst fears about the administration prioritizing political expediency over justice for survivors and truth for the American people. We are especially concerned that Todd Blanche, the person nominated for the highest law enforcement position in the country, was at the table. Blanche has consistently minimized legitimate concerns about how the files have been handled, including problematic redactions and the exposures of survivors' personal information. Blanche failed to deliver transparency, and he has gravely failed survivors. This is failing upward, plain and simple. We deserve better. We deserve the truth, transparency, and accountability. We deserve to be taken seriously when we come forward. And we deserve an attorney general who will use the full power of that office to pursue justice, protect others, and to ensure that what happened to us never happens again. So again, then we have Maria Farmer, Marina Larcerda. Let's read some of these names. We have Liz Stein. We have Gina Lisa Jones. We have Andrea Sterling. We have Charlene Rochard. We have Jess Michaels. We have Laura Bloom McGee. We have Sky and Amanda Roberts. Rachel Benavides. Danny Bensky. Meraki Chartoni. Lisa Phillips. Teresa J. Helm. Ashley Rubright. Audra Lynn Fasano. Juliet Bryant. Jane Doe and Jane Doe. So 2 members of that list did not want to reveal their names. But ultimately, really interesting that this came out today, right when Trump tried to start peace, by the way. Let's connect the dots. Very interesting that as soon as these Epstein files are released on Trump, or it's not the Epstein files, as soon as this court case with Bill Gates and he's testifying and then all these witnesses are coming out, all of a sudden, this gets dropped in the Twitter algorithm, just dropped right in the Twitter algorithm hours after Trump basically declares that we're going to officially end the war with Iran. Very weird to me. And we also have to understand that these Epstein files were held for months on end, months and months and months and months and months on end, years actually. So who knows what's true and what's not true within those files. But ultimately, very interesting timing, very interesting how all of this dropped today, the day that Trump is trying to, allegedly, it looks from appearance, trying to end the war. So we'll see what happens with this. We'll investigate this more into the future. But again, that's all for this show. What do you guys think about it? And be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. And honestly, what do you think is going to happen with all of this? The Iran war, do you think we're going to continue the war? Do you think that the Epstein files will actually become unredacted? Do you think Todd Blanche will be held accountable for protecting those who are in the Epstein files and not, bringing justice for the victims? Do you think that the victims are being blackmailed by Israel, perhaps? Because again, we know that, after watching the Lyndon B. Johnson video with the USS Liberty earlier in this episode, we understand that there is such thing as blackmail and blood libel. And we understand that the Epstein files are riddled with blackmail, and a lot of it is also riddled with a lot of politicians who wanted to just be a part of it. They actually wanted to be a part of that evil. So who knows? What do you guys think? Leave a comment below. Click like, share, subscribe. Check out our shorts. That's where all of the updated information is every day that I'm posting. And with that being said, I have nothing else. Stay prudent, stay powerful, and stay wealthy.